Hello again, this is Ed Mengel, and today I'm going to talk how to build amazing tables within Einstein Analytics. Now, many of you are already familiar with our tables. You've got a lot of options. You've got this shows bars, numbers, styling. We even have some of these great styling themes for you so you can use all these themes and style and make amazing tables. But this may not be enough for many of you, and you really want to do more. So, what I'd like to do today is explore a technique that I'm calling super tables, how you can add features that don't even exist in the product yet into your tables, tabular experiences. So, let me show you an example of one I've done, and I'm going to just go here. Here is my table. Now, what's so special about this table? What you'll notice is we've got text and numbers just like any other, but also I've embedded my own microchart. I have here a sparkline visualization. I have a polar gauge microchart right there. I also have clickable links, right? So if I want to go to the page about Johnny Green, then I can just click on this and it will load Johnny Green right there. So I have a one-click action where I can just go straight to that record. The other thing is you may say, hey, well, there's only 3 rows in this table. I could easily do this with more. And I also have this page view controller here. So now I can go to the 3rd page, the 4th page. I also have clickable sort, so I can have a wall of fame or a wall of shame. And of course, I've got faceting and filtering so you can focus on the rows that you want to have. Now, I'm not the first person to do this technique. Many people have been doing this to get around some of the feature limitations, but nor am I probably have done this in the most beautiful way possible. I imagine many of you could probably do a much more prettier table, but what I will say is I think I've found the absolutely most efficient way to do this, and what I'd like to share with you today is how to do this and how to do this efficiently. Now let me show you, for example, you've got all of these widgets, all of these queries. You'd say, hey, maybe if I expand this, this is going to be way too many queries. My dashboard's going to slow down. So in my case, this is actually only 4 queries. So 4 queries, and if I were to expand the number of rows, if I made this a 5-row table, a 10-row table, 20-row, it's still going to be 4 queries. So this is how we can build this in a scalable way and make sure you can create these experiences but not have them be slow. There's also a lot of cool add-ons that you can do with this. So now I haven't even used any pages here, so you can build more expressive experiences. Here's one with pages where I've used pages to do row expansion, so I can row this and expand this row and see more information about Johnny Green. Another thing to think about is mobile. What's your mobile experience? So you can check out the mobile layout here. What I've done is I've laid out these cards in a very mobile friendly way. I can scroll down. I still have that page view controller. You could also do card per page. That way you get that swipe experience where I can swipe across the cards to see each of these reps. Another thing you can do is playing around with gradients. So here, all I've done is a background gradient image, and you just add this gradient to the background of this table row, and you can get that cool style right there. So this video, I'm going to start you on the basics of how to get started and how to get this basic layout. I may do some future videos with some of these more advanced concepts, but this one's all going to focus on getting started and then look for those further ones later. So with that said, let's get started. All right, so we're going to start with a blank dashboard. Now, first thing we're going to do is set up the root query. So I'll just click on this blank space. I'll use my opportunities data set. We're going to group by owner. And we'll use the metric that we want to measure right here, and we'll just visualize this as a table. So this is going to be the source query that powers the root of our table. So I'm going to set this to 3 since we're only going to make a 3-row table. And I'm going to call this root query so I know what it is. We'll hit done. Next thing is we'll start building out our table. So I'm going to leave some space for the header, but I'm going to put a container widget right here. Let's style this a little bit. Use a border. We'll set a width of 2 and a really high border radius to get those rounded corners there. Once I have that, then I'm going to duplicate it. 1, 2, 3. You could always build out that one row first and duplicate, but we're going to do this one column at a time. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a text widget. So let's grab the text right there, and I'm going to duplicate that 2 more times. Now let's go in here and look at our text widgets. Now remember, these are going to be numbered in order because I dropped them top to bottom. I know that the first one is in the top position. So this text here, we're going to add a binding. So this is going to be a cell. We're going to go to the root query, and we're going to get to a results binding, get that first row, the owner name column, and do that as string. So let's also put that binding here and here, but this is going to get the first row, and this is going to get the second row, right? Let's hit done, and there we go. So now you can see we already have table cells. We've got that rep name right there. Now the next thing we want is a KPI, so we want a really powerful number. Now one way you can do this is with the number widget, and we could use a compare table to get all of those numbers in a single query. I'm going to show you that technique, but I'm going to do that technique when we get to gauges. So I'll show you the alternative way to do this is to again use a text widget. So let's do a text widget right here. The other thing you can always do is when you can put the binding first, and then when you copy this widget, that binding comes with it. Then when you just have to edit the binding. So let's try that. First thing though, what we need to do is go in and we need to add a little bit more information to our root query. So what you may remember is we have that number right there. Yes. But in this case, we want a text widget, so we actually want some text. So we may want to style some things. So let's go, we'll add a formula, and we're going to add a string formula here using a function, go down to the ends, number to string. So number to string takes a number. That number is going to be column A, and then we'll choose a format. So maybe let's format this with dollars, dollars and cents. Let's drop the cents right here. Let's apply, see how that looks. Okay, so now we have a string, which is the equivalent of that number, and remember that's column B, so we'll use that B later. So we'll hit update now. Let's go and we will edit that. So just notice we have text 4 here. We'll copy a binding right in here, but instead of owner name, this is going to be B, and that is looking correct. All right, so that works. Let's select this, copy, copy, and now I have that same widget with the same bindings, so we need to go in here and we're going to have to increment by 1 and increment by 2. Done. So now we are starting to get just each rep. We've got a number. We know how to add text. We know how to add a number. Let's do something a little bit more fancy. I'm going to add a gauge. So a gauge is a fun way to really make some information pop. There's a couple different gauges, right? We've got our polar gauge, flat gauge, the classic gauge, as well as a ratings widget like a number of stars. Let's do a polar gauge. If you're an Apple fan, you close your rings on your Apple Watch, so that'll be pretty fun to add one of those. What we're going to need though is we will need a query to help us with that. So let's first create that query. We're going to use the opportunities data set again. I'm just going to not be very fancy right now, and we'll stick with sum of amount. And we are going to add actually in this case we don't need a group, so we're going to go to the compare table though. We will need a filter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to filter by one particular owner. So I'll just pick Bruce Kennedy in this case right here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to clone this column and clone. And actually, you know what? This is going to be a little boring with some amount. So let's do something different. We'll just do count of rows, and I'm going to clone one more time. Okay, so now this is the same metric. It's a little boring, but what we're doing is we're just putting Bruce here so that he can be a placeholder for another binding. If we want to style this, maybe the easiest thing we can do right now is I can go and I'll just create that polar gauge right now. Notice what it does is it uses this first one and then hides the second and third. All right, so there we'll hit done. And I'm going to drag this onto the canvas. Now, again, you could copy this, but remember when you copy it, it's going to make a copy of the widget and the query. We want to reuse queries as much as possible here. So what I'm actually going to do is grab another chart and grab yet another chart, and I'm going to drag the query on here and click and drag the query on here. Now I've got still have the same chart, but they're all going to a different query. What I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this and use the power of the column map right here. So right here, I can drag this and replace. Now it's hard to see. I probably should use different reps so you can see that this is something different. But now what it's doing is it's warning you there and saying, hey, if you change things, you could break, there's that referential integrity. If other widgets are referring to the step, if I were to say delete a measure, delete a field that those other widgets are using, it would break things. So we're being careful here not to delete anything, but we can definitely change widget properties. And those widget properties we change will only affect the widget that I clicked on. So if that worked out correctly, I should have 3 different charts using 3 different measures, and they're all pointing to that one step, the all step. So what we need to do now is I am going to, first off, save. Again, this is bindings, very possibly error-prone process, so save to make sure that everything, don't lose your work. Now we'll just simply search for Bruce. So you can see we have 3 columns, all of them filtered by Bruce, which is definitely not what we want. And I'm going to paste in that same binding string again. I'm pasting in the owner name right there. So we want the first record, the second record, and the third record. 1, 2. All right, so now we have 3 different gauges, and each rep now has their number and their count of opportunities right there. The last thing I'm going to show you is let's do a link widget. So what I want this link widget to do is we're going to open up the actual record. So let's look at how we can do this. Let's go to our root query right now. We're going to edit that, and I'm going to add one more field. We're going to add another formula field right here, and I'm going to do first of owner ID. That will get that ID right there. And this is going to be known as C, but maybe I'll give it a ID, and I'll give it an alias of ID, which it's not going to allow because that's 2 letters uppercase. So let's try it lowercase ID. All right, and update. Now, what we can do is we are going to use an actual record link. So this is what a link to a record would look like in my org. And let's go to link. There we go. So destination. So first thing, actually, what I'm going to do is go here and I'm going to change this to a URL. There, and we'll paste that right in here. Save one more time. Now, what I can do is then take my binding, pretty much the same as this binding we've been using. So I'll copy that back to my clipboard. And right here, this is the ID. And we're going to bind just to that ID. Change this to ID. Hit done. And then let's just call it open. So first off, let's make sure that that works. This should be opening to Bruce Kennedy. And if I click on that, now we go straight to Bruce Kennedy's page. So let's go back here and let's see if we can recreate that. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to copy and copy. We'll drag this up, and go back to, should be at the bottom here. Here they are, and now you'll notice that link 2 should have an index of 1, link 3 should have an index of 2. So now we've got 3 links. They should all open that record. And now, one last thing we're going to do is add a microchart. And what I call this is a multi-grain microchart. We're going to use a similar technique to what we use with the gauges, but a little bit different. So we're going to create a query, opportunities, and we're going to group by something, a little bit of time. So let's say we'll do year, month, and we'll also add a filter on this. Maybe let's say we do the current fiscal year. Or something a little bit more exciting. Maybe we'll do the current year, previous year. All right, so let's see how they did on the previous year, and we're going to view this as a timeline chart. We're also going to style this, again, like we can style a microchart. So let's start looking at axis. We'll get rid of that x-axis. We'll get rid of the y-axis. So it looks a little bit more like a microchart kind of style. The other thing that we can do is, going back to that data, we're going to use that same technique that we used before. And first off, we're going to have to go to the compare table. This will do sum of amount. We're going to add a filter, owner name, and we'll use Bruce again as the placeholder. Clone and clone. out and go right back to that chart. Okay, so we hit done. I'm going to take this query, and he may not fit, so we can just there. So now I've got my micro chart, and what we're going to do is, again, we'll just drag 2 more charts, make this a little smaller, another one, and we'll drag that same step on. And again, we're taking advantage of the column map here, so when I go into here, it's going to warn me that it references both. I'm going to take the second sum of amount and drag it over the first, and I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to take that third sum of amount and drag it over the first. So now these should be 3 different measures, all referring to that same query right there. But we still have work to do in that I need to go and open this up. We're going to search for Bruce, and I'm going to take that binding that I have and paste it over. So that's going to be Bruce. This is going to be row 2 or number 1, and this is going to be 2. So there we have it. So now we've put together this table. We've got text, we've got a KPI, we've got a gauge visualization. We even have what I call here a multi-grain visualization, where the grain is separate from the table. And we've got a scalable way where we can always make these queries wider and support more rows on this table. But in this case, we've had 3 different queries. There are some results binding, so this root query is going to have to run first, and then these 2 queries will run in parallel. But this is going to load pretty fast, even if we expand it to more and more, make these queries more complex. So this is kind of how to get started with this technique. And then, of course, you can always use this as a template and bring in other data sources just by changing out the data and changing the fields in your bindings. So look for maybe some more videos where we can show how to do even some more advanced techniques here. Thanks a lot for listening.